Hello everyone, today I'll discuss how China is giving the US a taste of its own medicine. The US told China to control dual-use item exports, and China is doing just that. China still hasn't approved rare earth raw material exports to the US for military use. American military companies are worried manganese prices have skyrocketed 60-fold. If it weren't for this trade war, we wouldn't have realized just how much American military companies rely on China's mineral resources. Because of China's monopoly, these materials were sold too cheaply. China announced regulations to strengthen export controls on certain rare earth items. During the peak of the China-US trade war, China cut off supplies to the US. Although after the China-US negotiations in London on June 11, China announced it would further tighten exports of rare earth-related items to the US, it now seems that the main approvals were for civilian exports. American military companies still feel a significant threat. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal on August 3, a manufacturer supplying drone components to the US military was forced to delay orders by up to 2 months in order to find rare earth magnets from sources other than China. The report quoted American industry insiders as saying that the prices of certain materials needed by the US defense industry have now soared to more than 5 times what they were before China imposed restrictions, with the price of rare earth manganese rising even more sharply. The latest quoted price has skyrocketed to 60 times the normal price. Manganese is one of the rare earth elements, and its main commercial use is in the production of manganese-cobalt magnets, whose permanent magnetization strength is second only to that of radium-chromium magnets. However, manganese compounds can withstand higher temperatures, tolerating over 700 degrees Celsius. Therefore, manganese-cobalt magnets do not easily lose their magnetism in high-temperature environments, making them a key material used in fighter jet engines. US suppliers and senior officials from the Department of Defense have complained that the soaring prices of rare earth materials are driving up the costs of the entire defense system. Some commentators have said that the shortage of critical minerals in the US highlights the military's dependence on China within its supply chain. Although American companies have been working hard in recent years to find alternative sources for these minerals, these rare elements are so niche that the West cannot produce them in an economically viable way. Some US defense contractors have warned that if the supply of critical minerals cannot be restored, they will have to cut back on production. Lin, the CEO of the US subsidiary of Italian defense giant Leonardo, said that their current stock of niobium is only enough to maintain a safe inventory level. In order to ensure timely delivery of products, the supply of materials must improve in the second half of this year. Niobium is used in the infrared sensors found in missiles and other equipment produced by Leonardo. Lin said the company is working to diversify its supply chain while also searching for alternative materials to niobium. According to reports, the US Department of Defense has required defense contractors to stop purchasing rare earth magnets containing minerals sourced from China by 2027. So some companies have built up fairly large inventories of magnets. However, for many other critical minerals besides rare earth magnets, suppliers and defense companies typically have less than a year's worth of inventory, sometimes only enough to last a few months. Some insiders in the US defense industry say that drone manufacturers are among the most vulnerable groups. Many of them are small startups with very limited income, lacking experience in supply chain management, and do not have large reserves of rare earth magnets and metals. Hardwick, vice president of the Aerospace Industries Association of America, said, "I can tell you, our companies are talking about this supply cutoff issue every single day now." According to information from US defense supply company Gavini, American defense weapon systems use more than 80,000 components that involve minerals currently affected by China's export controls. Gavini said that almost every critical mineral supply chain includes at least one Chinese supplier. This means that China's supply restriction measures will have widespread effects. The Wall Street Journal reported that since China tightened export controls earlier this year, China has begun requiring companies to provide detailed documentation explaining the intended use of exported rare earths and magnets, in order to ensure these materials are not used for US military purposes. It turns out that China still has not resumed the supply of rare earths to American military enterprises. a Western company that supplies Chinese-made rare earth magnets to U.S. civilian facilities and military defense companies, said that their recent application to import rare earth magnets for civilian use into the U.S. has been approved by the Chinese authorities. However, applications for use in the U.S. defense and aerospace sectors have either been rejected or delayed. In May of this year, Ebolai, a drone motor manufacturer based in New Hampshire, received a message from their Chinese rare earth magnet supplier. The supplier sent official Chinese forms, requesting them to provide product blueprints and a list of their buyers. The suppliers also asked the company to guarantee that the rare earth magnets supplied by China would not be used in military applications. Obviously, Ebolai was unable to meet these requirements. Among his roughly 100 clients are not only major U.S. defense contractors, but also drone manufacturers in Ukraine. Afterwards, Ebolai's Chinese supplier suspended shipments to him, forcing him to delay his customers' orders by 2 months and look for alternative suppliers in the US, Europe, Japan, and other regions. However, these suppliers are actually just as dependent on Chinese rare earths. Ebolai has also reached agreements with startup magnet producer VCAN Elements in North Carolina and U.S. Rare Earths, headquartered in Oregon. However, these companies won't be able to supply Ebolai until at least the end of this year. According to metal traders, because China requires knowledge of the end users of the rare earth magnets and metals they supply, traders' applications for stockpiling permits have not been approved, since stockpiling in advance simply cannot provide information on the final users. On the other hand, as the US faces a rare earth shortage, it is eager to find alternatives to Chinese rare earths, but the process has not been smooth. In early July, the US Department of Defense agreed to spend $400 million to purchase preferred shares of MP Materials, the largest rare earth producer in the country, making it the company's largest shareholder. MP Materials owns the only currently operating rare earth mine in the United States and is seen as the greatest hope for reviving the American rare earth industry. American defense industry giant Lockheed Martin Company's chief revenue officer, Tucker Light, later said that the agreement they signed with MP Materials is groundbreaking. This agreement will help secure the supply of magnets needed for their production of F-35 fighter jets and cruise missiles. But Tucker Light emphasized that building a new supply chain takes time. Several industry insiders in the United States have analyzed that, although the US possesses rare earth resources, it lacks investors willing to take risks in the rare earth sector, which is dominated by China. For investors, venturing into an industry already dominated by China carries significant risks. The deal between the U.S. Department of Defense and MP Materials has already raised concerns among a number of American mining executives and former government officials. Some critics say that this deal has crossed the line, as it gives MP Materials an unfair advantage, allowing it to undercut competitors and disrupt the market, thereby harming America's long-term competitiveness. An executive from a rare earth company commented that the U.S. government is now picking winners and deciding losers, and it seems like they are putting all their bets on a single company. According to the Wall Street Journal, traditionally, the procurement of critical minerals has been outsourced to defense companies that fit the national context, leveraging their market influence to make direct investments and secure their own sources of key materials. Industry insiders say that large defense companies are becoming increasingly anxious, realizing that no matter what happens, unless they get directly involved in investing, they simply won't be able to obtain rare earth magnets. A veteran in the mining industry and former CEO of Molycorp, Mark Smith, said that it will take Western countries several years to develop a certain level of rare earth processing capacity. The US needs to build facilities to address this issue, a long and difficult process. Jiang Haiming, former VP of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, predicts that rare earth supply diversification strategies of countries like the US will face challenges, including time, cost, and human resources. According to Jiang, this will take at least 10 to 20 years, and cost at least $1 trillion. Where will the necessary talent come from now? Who actually knows how to process these materials? Who understands the purification techniques? How can high purity be achieved? These experts don't exist in most Western countries. To sum up, after the China-US negotiations in London on June 11, China only approved the export of rare earths for civilian use to the US. American military-industrial companies couldn't buy Chinese rare earths. It's estimated that this will be the main bargaining chip China holds in future negotiations with the US. Second, China is now well aware of its own leverage. In the past 2 years, the US hasn't found evidence China supplied weapons to Russia, so now they're accusing China of exporting dual-use items. Since the US is asking China to control dual-use items, China is now restricting rare earths for military purposes, and as a result, refuses to export dual-use items to American military-industrial companies. Especially for Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and Boeing Defense, US military-industrial companies sanctioned by China, they cannot expect to buy Chinese rare earth magnets. They're forced to scramble for them on the market at high prices. Third, even if US military-industrial companies and the US government want to produce rare earth magnets domestically, they won't achieve sufficient supply even after 10 years. American weapons systems use over 80,000 components, involving key minerals under Chinese export controls. If the US had to make all of these on its own, it's honestly unimaginable. This really seems like an unsolvable dilemma. They can only blame themselves for neglecting the hard and thankless work of manufacturing. US data independence collapsed. When President Trump was dissatisfied with employment figures, he could fire the Statistics Bureau head.